Hello, story lovers, and welcome back to my channel, Tales with Tasha. I am Tasha and I am a storyteller. I love stories and I hope you will enjoy mine as much as I do. We have a third reimagined fairy tale today, this one a dark fantasy retelling of Cinderella, with witches rather than fairy godmothers to continue our theme of the week. It has a horror edge, but along the lines of fantasy horror. Don't forget to let me know your favourite genres/themes in the comments so I can make sure to have you covered in planning for 2022. Please subscribe to support the channel. For those new to YouTube, it's free. And also, smash that like button if you enjoy the tale. Thank you, lovelies. This story is what I would define as 12A-ish, not suitable for younger viewers because of its darker leanings. With that being said, make sure you're sitting comfortably, and let's jump right on in. Power play. Appearances can be deceiving. A dark fantasy retelling of Cinderella by Natasha Duncan Drake. Cinders covertly checked the prince was still following her before quickly stepping out of the side door. She had been very careful all evening to catch Prince George's eye and to be very demure when talking to him. It made her smile to herself. She could feel the lust coming off him even at this distance. She'd heard all the stories about him from the back alleys. A prince as charming as any kingdom has to offer to the court and the general populace. The taverns and the brothels knew better. His disguises were always very good, but when magical eyes were watching, no normal human could hide. Although generous with his money, his reputation among the working girls was not good. It had made the decision of who to choose all the easier. His lust made him an easy target. Cinders composed herself as if she was simply enjoying a breath of the night air. The trap was almost sprung, and she did not want to lose her prey now. She could feel him as he stepped out onto the stone walkway. He reeked of need, to her magical senses at least. In her current guise, her nose was no more sensitive than a human's. Just to sell her act a little more, she gazed into the distance and sighed a lovesick little sigh. When he cleared his throat and took a step closer to her than would have been polite, she gave a little start, as if she had had no idea he was there. "Prince George," she said, making her eyes as big and as round as she could. "Fair lady," he replied, giving her a bow. She knew the fact he did not know her name was driving him crazy. It was hard to keep the smile inside. "My apologies for interrupting you," he went on, "but your beauty has enraptured me." Cinders fluttered her eyelashes and smiled, looking down as if that thrilled but embarrassed her. It was all part of the game, but she found it utterly ridiculous. She had to time it perfectly. "You are too kind," she said, looking at him through her long eyelashes. He was all but vibrating in place. It was hilarious. If this had been one of the taverns, she had no doubt he would have been tearing at her clothes by now. So much need held at bay. She had to admire him for that, at least. She was all too familiar with overwhelming urges. "I am to choose a lady to court tonight, since my father has decreed it is time for me to marry," he told her. "Yes, Your Highness," Cinders replied. "Would you allow me to court you, my lady?" he asked. Cinders did her very best to blush, as she once again pretended to be overwhelmed. "Me, Your Highness," she said, "but I am no one special." "You are the most beautiful young woman I have ever seen," he told her. since the enchantment she had used had been designed to make her appealing specifically to him. His pronouncement was not overly shocking. "You do me too much honour," she replied. "I do you not nearly enough," he said, reaching out and taking her hand before bowing and lightly kissing her fingers. It was a very good act. She could see why everyone in court thought him the most eligible and suitable match for their daughters, even beside the rank and privilege. Cinders giggled in her best impression of an innocent maiden. "Will you allow my suit?" he asked. It was a formality. No woman in her right mind would refuse the prince, and by law none could. Of course, the illusion had to be maintained that it was all perfectly consensual. "Your Highness," she said. "George, please," he replied. "George," she said with another small smile, "I would beg one thing of you before I answer." "Anything," he told her. "I must know if I can love you," she told him, "and my mamma always told me that when I met the man I wished to marry, I would be sure by his kiss." "That would be a boon to me," the prince replied almost instantly. He went to step towards her, but she backed away slightly. For just a second a frown marred his features. "Could we wait until the first stroke of midnight?" she asked, looking at him through her lashes again. "I have heard it is a most magical time." The smile returned to Prince George's face. "It would give me great pleasure," he replied, clearly now sure he was going to get what he wanted. Now Cinders allowed him to step closer, tilting her chin up with the tip of his fingers. He really did have the most amazing blue eyes. She was going to enjoy this. As the bell on the royal chapel sounded its first chime, George leaned in and placed the softest kiss to her lips. Cinders smiled into the touch as magic rushed through her. He gasped, freezing in place as the enchantment moved from him to her. On the second chime, she stepped back. His eyes went wide, about the only part of him that he could move voluntarily, as he saw her true face. Gone was her long blonde hair, and in its place the deepest black. Her fine dress had become leather trousers and a billowing cream shirt, her tiny clutch purse a sword. She was still beautiful, that she knew, but she was definitely not the demure little thing he had been chasing. The only thing that had not changed were her fine shoes, which were pinching her feet. She slipped them off. "Don't worry, Prince," she told him. "I am not here to kill you. In fact, I intend for you to live a long, long life." Reaching down, she picked up one of her slippers. "Ours is going to be the love story of the century," she said, allowing her magic to flow to the surface. The green glow from her eyes reflected off his pale skin. "This shoe is your token," she told him as his gaze went glassy, "and you will defend it with your life." "I will defend it," he said, voice monotone. "You saw your love run away into the night," she went on, "and you will do anything to find her. You will search the whole land to find who fits the slipper. And when you find me, you will make me your wife." "I will make you my wife," he intoned. "Good boy," she said, and patted him on the cheek with her free hand. Placing the shoe back on the ground, she picked up the other one and made her escape. That was almost too easy. Cinders let herself in the back door. After all, she didn't want the neighbours seeing her true face. "Did it work?" Drusilla was on her the moment she walked into the kitchen. Her sisters had been at the ball as well, but Drusilla was a little highly strung. Of course it worked, she replied, putting the shoe she was still carrying into one of the cupboards. You are so clever, Cinders, Drusilla told her with a big smile. Cinders loved her sisters, but neither of them was blessed with the brains of the family. They were, however, very good at playing their parts in the charade their family had created when they moved to the city. The whole neighbourhood was aware of poor little Cinders and how terribly her horrible family treated her. All part of the epic romance that would lull everyone into a false sense of security. He kissed you of his own free will. The voice from the doorway made her turn. Yes, mother, Cinders replied, just as the enchantment required. I almost felt sorry for him, it was so easy. He is fully under my power, and will be here within the week on his great quest. Her mother was playing the role of evil stepmother in this time, with tales of an absent merchant father away at sea. However, it was more than obvious they were related to any who saw their true faces. Cinders took after her mother in build, beauty, and the incredibly dark hair. In some circles it was believed that the darker a witch's hair, the more powerful she was. Well done, child, her mother said with a smile. I tire of this kingdom's provincial idiocy. It will be good to finally leave. Can we go somewhere more fun next? Lucretia, her other sister, asked from behind their mother. I will consult the crystal closer to the time, their mother said. We must go where we are led, but I have hopes, girls. I have hopes. Oh, goody, Drusilla said, clapping her hands. Cinders shared a look with her mother, knowing placating words when she heard them. One day she would take her mother's place as head of the family, and she was well aware they would always go where the dark powers guided them. They were granted magic, wealth, and a long life, and the price was leaving chaos in their wake. Come, girls, their mother said. I think you all deserve a treat. I have a little plaything all tied up in the drawing room, so we can have some fun. Lucretia actually squealed. Cinders simply gave her mother a smile. The prince arrived with his entourage precisely when he was expected. Cinders headed for the kitchen, whispering the spell to transform her shape and clothes as a herald banged on their front door. She watched through a crack in the kitchen door as her sisters simpered all over the prince, giving absolutely superb performances. The wailing when the slipper failed to fit might have been a bit much, but most of the prince's party appeared immune to it. Perhaps her sisters were not the only ones who had appeared devastated. Are there any more maidens in the household? The herald asked, as the prince glowered at everyone. No one of importance, Cinders' mother said. Just... Cinders made a show of falling through the kitchen door as if by accident, right on cue. My stepdaughter, her mother finished with derision. All maidens of age must try on the shoe, the herald pronounced loudly. But she was not at the ball, her stepmother protested. Cinders daintily climbed to her feet and looked at the prince demurely through her lashes. She saw the moment he saw something through the dirt and ragged clothes that sparked vague recognition. Give me the slipper, he demanded, holding out his hand. So far, the prince had simply stood there and watched, as his entourage did all the work. In fact, the footman was so shocked it took him a moment to place the slipper in the prince's hand. Cinders blushed as the prince fell to one knee before her. Your foot, please, my lady, the prince said, oozing charm from every pore. Cinders glanced worriedly at her mother to sell the scene, before carefully lifting one of her currently ash-covered but dainty feet. With a flair only a prince could manage, George slipped the shoe onto her foot. My lady, he said, looking up at her in adoration, It must be a mistake, her mother protested. Stepmother, I have the other shoe in the pantry, Cinders said in a sweet tone. Get it, Prince George instructed one of his men. It is in the third cupboard on the right, Cinders said as the armed guard hurried off. Will you grant me your name, my lady? The prince asked, still on one knee. They call me Cinderella, she replied, fluttering her eyelashes. A beautiful name, George said with a besotted smile. You have captured my heart, Cinderella, and it will have no other. Will you consent to be my princess, and then my queen? Oh, she replied, placing a hand over her heart. Your Highness, I am not worthy. It never hurt to rub it in a bit. You are the most worthy, the prince said, taking her hand and climbing to his feet. Will you be mine? She smiled up at him, just as the guard returned with the other slipper. Yes, Your Highness, she said. Yes. The whole kingdom celebrated, and there was a huge, luxurious wedding. Cinders made a big show of forgiving her stepfamily for their mistreatment, because she was such a good and kind young woman, which the people loved. So of course they all moved into the palace. Prince George was his usual charming self outside their luxurious apartments, but Cinders kept him sitting in the corner behind closed doors. Sometimes she let her sisters play with him. He even seemed to enjoy that part. The happy couple put off their honeymoon as the king fell ill at the wedding reception, and Prince George was required to take his father's place. Cinders took over the queen's duties in the kingdom and the palace after a couple of weeks as well, so the poor woman could focus on her failing husband. That was when Cinders was finally given the keys to the royal vault. She and her family cleaned it out the very same night, including the magical necklace that had been thrown in there and forgotten at some point. It was more valuable than all the gold and jewels in the kingdom. Using its power, they put the whole palace to sleep for a few hours. Can we keep him? Drusilla said, looking at George, sleeping like all the rest. He's so pretty. He would get in the way, her mother replied. Besides, there will be plenty more pretty things where we're going. Drusilla pouted, but they never argued with their mother. They all rode away with a cart full of riches and even more magic. Cinders laughed with her sisters and looked forward to their next happily ever after. I do love a powerful woman or two in stories, don't you? Wonder how Prince George is going to feel when he wakes up. Thank you for joining me, and I hope you enjoyed this tale too. Please, smash the like button if you enjoyed my story, and it would make me very happy if you would subscribe. It's totally free apart from the odd ad, and if you click the bell icon too, YouTube will let you know when I publish new vids. You'll never miss out on a story, and it will really help my channel. Thank you so much. There is an ebook version of the story on Amazon and all the other major retailers if you would like a copy to keep. There is a link in the description, or scan the QR code on screen now. See you next week. As always, we'll have 4 YouTube shorts on Monday to Thursday and another long video on Friday. And now, cute kitties for all the cat lovers.